Welcome back, you beautiful anomaly, you walking contradiction, you impossible equation they keep trying to solve with the wrong formula. They laughed because they couldn't understand you. They mocked you because your silence exposed their noise. Every joke they made at your expense became evidence of their insecurity. And now, the very person they wanted to impress has seen through the performance. Respect doesn't follow the loudest voice. It follows the one who never begged for attention. Stay with me, because today you'll discover why being underestimated was never your weakness. It was the trap that revealed everyone else's true face. The room always changes before the people do. You can feel it in the silence that arrives just before someone decides to make you the target. Eyes begin to shift, smirks appear without warning. A single laugh escapes into the air. And suddenly your existence becomes the stage where insecure people perform for an audience they desperately want to impress. They never chose you because you were weak. They chose you because your presence made them feel ordinary. And nothing terrifies an insecure mind more than standing beside someone it cannot understand. There is a strange psychology behind public humiliation. People rarely mock the person beneath them. They mock the person they secretly compare themselves to. Every sarcastic comment, every fake smile, every exaggerated joke hides an invisible confession. It says, "Please notice me instead." Their real audience was never you. They were looking past your shoulder, hoping someone important would laugh with them. They believed that if they could reduce your value, their own would somehow increase. Think about how desperate that really is. Imagine needing another human being to become smaller just so you can appear taller. Imagine building confidence from someone else's temporary discomfort. That isn't strength. That is borrowed significance. It lasts only as long as the crowd keeps clapping. The moment the laughter fades, the emptiness returns. What they never realized is that every performance reveals more about the actor than the target. While they were busy creating a version of you that people could laugh at, they unknowingly revealed the version of themselves they had been hiding. Arrogance disguised fear, confidence disguised insecurity, humor disguised jealousy. The mask slipped every single time they opened their mouth. The most dangerous people in any room are not the loudest. They are the quiet observers, the ones who don't rush to laugh. The ones who pay attention to reactions instead of words. While everyone else focused on the joke, those observers studied character. They noticed who needed validation. They noticed who remained calm under pressure. They noticed who tried too hard and who never needed to. That is where the entire game begins to collapse, because respect isn't created by entertaining people. Respect is created by revealing who you become when people try to break your composure. Anyone can smile when they are being praised. Very few can remain centered while becoming the target of ridicule. That kind of control cannot be faked. It cannot be rehearsed. It appears only when pressure exposes what lives beneath the surface. Every insult became a test you never signed up for. Every attempt to embarrass you became an unexpected opportunity to display emotional discipline. While they believed they were lowering your status, they were actually creating the perfect contrast. Their emotional chaos highlighted your stability. Their need for approval exposed your independence. Their noise made your silence impossible to ignore. Here's the part most people never understand. Mockery is usually an investment. People expect a return. They expect anger. They expect tears. They expect you to defend yourself so the performance becomes even more entertaining. But when you refuse to play your assigned role, the entire script falls apart. Suddenly, the person making jokes becomes uncomfortable. They have no second act because the audience is no longer watching you. They're watching them. Psychologically, this creates something powerful. The crowd begins asking silent questions. Why is the loud one trying so hard? Why isn't the quiet one reacting? Why does confidence seem to belong to the person saying the least? Those questions slowly replace laughter with curiosity. Curiosity turns into respect. Respect turns into influence. The irony is almost poetic. The person who mocked you believed they were controlling the narrative. In reality, they surrendered control the moment they made you their focus. Every minute spent attacking you was a minute spent admitting your presence mattered. Truly insignificant people are ignored. They are forgotten. They are invisible. But you became the center of attention because your existence disrupted something inside them they couldn't explain. They thought humiliation would shrink your value, but pressure has a strange habit. It doesn't destroy diamonds. It reveals them. Every attempt to make you look foolish became another opportunity for people with discernment to recognize your restraint, your patience, and your quiet strength. While they chased approval through performance, you earned something far more valuable without asking for it. You became unforgettable simply because you refused to become what they expected. There is a terrifying moment that almost nobody notices. It happens when the room goes quiet, not because people have stopped talking, but because someone has started watching. The loudest voices mistake silence for victory, never realizing that real judgment begins after the performance ends. While they celebrate applause, something invisible is measuring character, and that invisible force never rewards the one who begged to be seen. Most people spend their lives chasing attention because they confuse it with respect. They believe the louder they become, the more important they appear. They mistake laughter for admiration, popularity for influence, and approval for power. But attention is temporary. It belongs to whoever entertains the crowd in the moment. Respect is different. Respect belongs to the person whose character remains unchanged when the crowd turns hostile. This is why those who perform for applause are always exhausted. Every conversation becomes another stage. Every opinion becomes another act. Every interaction is calculated. They constantly ask themselves invisible questions. Did they like me? Did I sound impressive? Did I win the room? Their confidence depends entirely on reactions they cannot control. The audience becomes their prison without them ever realizing it. You chose a different path, even if you didn't know it at first. Every time someone underestimated you, every time they interrupted you, ignored you, or laughed at your expense, you were being trained to detach from something that controls almost everyone else. You learned that validation disappears as quickly as it arrives. You discovered that applause is one of the weakest foundations a person can build their identity upon. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who doesn't need recognition to believe in themselves. They walk differently. They speak with intention instead of urgency. They don't rush to prove their intelligence because they already know who they are. Their confidence doesn't fluctuate with compliments or criticism. That kind of stability makes insecure people uncomfortable because it cannot be manipulated. Think about the individuals history remembers, the people who changed industries, challenged traditions, or transformed entire generations rarely began with universal approval. Most were misunderstood, mocked, rejected. Their ideas were questioned before they were celebrated. If they had depended on applause, they would have quit long before anyone recognized their value. The human mind naturally pays attention to certainty, not arrogance, not ego, certainty. And certainty doesn't announce itself with noise. It reveals itself through consistency. The person who remains calm while everyone else is desperate to be noticed becomes impossible to ignore. Ironically, the less they seek validation, the more valuable their presence becomes. Those who mocked you believed visibility was everything. They wanted immediate reactions, immediate laughter, immediate approval. They couldn't imagine that someone sitting quietly in the same room was observing something much deeper. That observer wasn't evaluating who delivered the funniest joke. They were evaluating integrity, emotional control, authenticity, qualities that survive long after entertainment fades. Psychologically, people trust consistency more than charisma. Charisma attracts attention, but consistency earns confidence. Anyone can create excitement for a few minutes. Very few people can create trust over time. That's why loud personalities often burn brightly before disappearing, while calm, disciplined individuals quietly become the people everyone eventually depends on. Every moment you refused to argue unnecessarily, you communicated strength. Every time you resisted the temptation to match someone else's negativity, you demonstrated discipline. Every occasion where you chose restraint over revenge became evidence that your identity wasn't available for negotiation. That is a language stronger than any speech. Meanwhile, those chasing applause unknowingly trapped themselves in an endless cycle. Once you build your reputation on entertaining people, you must keep performing forever. Every room expects another show. Every conversation demands another performance. They become addicted to reactions because silence feels like failure. What they call confidence is often nothing more than fear wearing expensive clothes. You escaped that trap. Maybe not intentionally, maybe through pain, maybe through rejection, maybe because life forced you into solitude where nobody was clapping. But somewhere in that loneliness, you discovered a frightening truth. The strongest version of yourself appeared when nobody was watching. Your discipline grew without an audience. Your resilience developed without applause. Your character evolved in complete silence. And that is why real respect arrives differently. It doesn't announce itself with cheers. It appears in the changed behavior of people who once overlooked you. It appears when your opinion suddenly carries weight without demanding attention. It appears when those who never believed in you begin listening more carefully than speaking, because they finally understand that influence was never created by making the most noise. It was created by becoming someone whose presence speaks even before a single word leaves their mouth. The most dangerous eyes in the room are never the loudest ones. They belong to the person who says almost nothing, smiles at almost nothing, and notices everything. While everyone else is distracted by the performance, that silent observer is collecting evidence. Every forced laugh, every exaggerated insult, every desperate attempt to make you look small becomes another piece of a puzzle that exposes who everyone truly is. Long before anyone speaks the truth, human behavior already has. The people trying to embarrass you always believe they are controlling the story. They assume the audience only sees what they choose to display. They think confidence can be manufactured through volume, sarcasm, or public humiliation. What they fail to understand is that intelligent observers rarely judge words alone. They judge motives, they study timing, they notice patterns. They recognize when someone's confidence depends on another person's discomfort. That is the difference between ordinary attention and genuine perception. Most people hear conversations. Very few read them. The observer wasn't interested in who delivered the sharpest joke. They wanted to know why the joke existed in the first place. Why was so much energy directed toward one individual? Why did someone seem desperate to earn approval by attacking another person? Those questions quietly destroyed the illusion the performer had spent so much effort creating. People often underestimate how much emotional intelligence reveals. A person with experience can detect insecurity within seconds. It hides inside unnecessary competition. It appears in constant interruptions. It lives inside the habit of making someone else the target just to entertain a crowd. These behaviors are rarely random. They are psychological signals pointing toward an internal battle the performer is desperately trying to hide. And then there was you. You didn't realize that every calm reaction was changing the observer's opinion. Every moment you refused to argue, every time you answered disrespect with composure instead of chaos, you silently separated yourself from the game everyone else was playing. While others competed for attention, you demonstrated control. Control is something insecure people imitate but rarely possess. The observer noticed another detail that everyone else missed. Your silence wasn't empty. It wasn't weakness disguised as patience. It was restraint. There is a tremendous difference between someone who cannot fight back and someone who chooses not to. One is powerless, the other is disciplined. That distinction changes everything. Human beings instinctively admire emotional discipline because it is rare. Anyone can lose control when provoked. Anyone can respond with anger after being insulted. But remaining centered while your reputation is being tested requires something much deeper than confidence. It requires identity. People who know who they are do not panic every time someone misunderstands them. Ironically, the louder your critics became, the more credibility they lost. Every additional insult sounded less like confidence and more like obsession. Every repeated joke raised a silent question inside the observer's mind. If this person truly doesn't matter, why can't you stop talking about them? Why do they occupy so much space in your thoughts? Why are you working so hard to convince everyone else? Obsession has a strange habit of exposing admiration disguised as resentment. Without realizing it, they kept proving your importance. Truly irrelevant people are ignored. Nobody wastes energy destroying something they believe has no value. The intensity of someone's attack often reveals the intensity of the threat they secretly feel. Their actions became an unintentional confession that your presence unsettled them far more than they were willing to admit. The observer understood this immediately. They recognized that people secure in themselves rarely need public victories. They don't need to embarrass others to feel respected. They don't turn every interaction into a competition. Their confidence exists before the conversation begins and remains after it ends. That realization quietly shifted the balance of power. Respect doesn't always arrive with compliments. Sometimes it begins with curiosity. The observer started paying closer attention to you instead of the performer. They watched how you carried yourself after the laughter faded. They noticed you didn't seek revenge or chase approval. You simply continued moving with the same quiet certainty. That consistency answered questions words never could. In the end, the performance achieved the exact opposite of its purpose. The person trying to impress someone else unknowingly introduced them to your character. Every attempt to make you look insignificant only created a stronger contrast between manufactured confidence and authentic strength. The observer wasn't impressed by the loudest person in the room. They were impressed by the one who never needed the room's permission to remain exactly who they were. Sometimes the greatest revenge is so quiet that the people who hurt you don't realize they've already lost. They keep smiling. They keep performing. They keep believing the story is still under their control. But beneath the surface, something irreversible has already happened. The balance has shifted. The audience they were trying to impress is no longer watching the performance. They're studying the performer. And that is the exact moment mockery begins to destroy the one who created it. People believe humiliation is powerful because they only measure the first reaction. They see laughter. They hear applause. They notice the crowd turning its attention toward the joke, but they never stay long enough to witness what happens afterward. Every performance has an ending. Every mask eventually slips. Every act eventually reveals the exhausted face hiding underneath. What survives after the laughter disappears is not entertainment. It is character. Your composure became something they never expected to face. They planned for anger. They prepared for excuses. They wanted you to defend yourself, to lose your temper, to give them another reason to continue. Their entire strategy depended on controlling your emotions. The moment you refused to react the way they imagined, the script collapsed in front of everyone. This is one of the oldest psychological traps in human behavior. When someone provokes another person, they are attempting to transfer emotional control. If they can make you angry whenever they choose, they begin believing they own a part of your mind. Your reactions become their evidence of power. Every emotional outburst convinces them they are winning. But when nothing happens, when you remain calm despite the pressure, they experience something unexpected. They begin losing confidence in their own influence. Silence has a terrifying effect on insecure people. It forces them to confront themselves. Without your reaction, they have nothing to hide behind. The spotlight that was once fixed on you slowly turns toward them. Their jokes start sounding repetitive. Their confidence begins looking forced. Their laughter becomes louder because internally they sense something slipping away. Meanwhile, you are communicating a message without opening your mouth. You are saying that your identity is not available for public negotiation. You are proving that your emotional state cannot be rented by someone else's opinion. That level of self-control unsettles people because it represents freedom. Most individuals spend their lives chained to the opinions of strangers. Watching someone break those chains reminds them of their own dependence. The observer notices this transformation long before anyone else does. At first, they simply watch. Then they compare. One person is working harder every minute to maintain attention. The other person remains completely unchanged. One is chasing approval. The other is protecting inner peace. Slowly, respect begins changing direction. People naturally trust emotional stability. They may laugh with chaos for a moment, but they rely on consistency when real decisions matter. The individual who remains composed under pressure becomes someone others instinctively believe in. They appear dependable, predictable, strong. Those qualities cannot be manufactured through clever words or dramatic performances. Your restraint created an invisible contrast. Every insult highlighted your patience. Every attempt to embarrass you magnified your confidence. Every sarcastic comment exposed the emotional dependence of the person delivering it. Without realizing it, they became the evidence supporting your character. There is another truth most people ignore. Those who constantly seek public victories often suffer private defeats. They need validation because they cannot generate confidence internally. Every compliment acts like temporary medicine. Every laugh becomes another dose. But the effect never lasts. Soon they need another audience, another performance, another target. Their identity becomes an endless cycle of proving something they secretly doubt. You escape that cycle by refusing to participate. Instead of competing for attention, you invested in something far more powerful, self-respect. Self-respect doesn't require witnesses. It doesn't need applause. It survives in empty rooms. It grows during lonely nights. It becomes stronger every time you choose discipline over impulse. The irony is almost impossible to ignore. They wanted everyone to remember your embarrassment, but people rarely remember the joke forever. What they do remember is the person who handled pressure with dignity. They remember the calm expression while everyone else chased reactions. They remember the quiet confidence that refused to become bitterness. Over time, the details of the mockery disappear, but the impression of your composure remains. That is why emotional control is one of the rarest forms of power. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic speeches or public victories. It reveals itself through consistency when chaos surrounds you. While others waste energy trying to control your image, your composure quietly rewrites the entire story until even the people they were trying to impress can no longer ignore where true strength has always existed. The moment they realized they could no longer control you, fear quietly replaced confidence. It didn't happen with a dramatic confrontation or a loud declaration. It happened in silence, in that unsettling instant when they understood their words no longer reached your mind. The weapon they had used for so long had become useless, and nothing frightens a manipulative person more than losing access to someone else's emotions. Control has never been about strength. It has always been about predictability. As long as they knew exactly how you would react, they believed they were one step ahead. They expected your anger. They expected your frustration. They expected you to defend yourself, explain yourself, or desperately fight to repair your reputation. Every reaction gave them another opportunity to stay in control. But the day you stopped responding according to their script, their confidence began collapsing from the inside. Psychologically, people become uncomfortable when familiar patterns suddenly disappear. The human brain depends on predictability because it creates the illusion of certainty. When someone who was once emotionally available becomes emotionally disciplined, it creates confusion. Suddenly, manipulation stops working. Guilt loses its influence. Mockery loses its entertainment. Provocation loses its reward. The person who once believed they understood you now feels like they're standing in front of a locked door with no key. That uncertainty is where your real power begins. Power isn't the ability to dominate another person. It is the ability to remain in command of yourself while someone else desperately tries to pull you into their chaos. Most people spend years learning how to influence others, yet never learn how to master their own emotions. The moment you accomplish that, external control becomes almost impossible. Your silence forced them into unfamiliar territory. Without your reactions, they had nothing to measure themselves against. Every sarcastic remark disappeared into empty space. Every insult echoed back toward the person who spoke it. Instead of damaging your confidence, their behavior slowly exposed their dependence on your participation. Think about how strange that really is. The person trying to weaken you actually needed you more than you ever needed them. They required your emotional response to feel significant. They depended on your frustration to convince themselves they were powerful. Without realizing it, they had built their confidence on a foundation that belonged entirely to someone else. The day you withdrew your attention, their entire structure began shaking. People often mistake loud behavior for authority. They assume the person speaking the most has the most control. Reality usually works in reverse. The individual who remains emotionally unaffected controls the direction of the interaction. They decide what deserves their attention. They decide which opinions deserve space inside their mind. That freedom cannot be taken by force because it comes from internal discipline rather than external approval. The observer noticed this shift almost immediately. What once looked like a confident performer now appeared increasingly desperate. Their jokes became more frequent. Their criticism became more personal. Their attempts to provoke you became more obvious. Why? Because unsuccessful manipulation always becomes more aggressive before it disappears. When subtle tactics fail, insecure people often increase the pressure, hoping something will finally produce the reaction they miss. But your calm remained unchanged. Every failed attempt quietly reversed the balance of power. Instead of proving your weakness, they kept proving your independence. Instead of exposing your flaws, they exposed their inability to move forward without making you the center of attention. Every conversation returned to you. Every comparison involved you. Every performance somehow required your presence. That wasn't evidence of your insignificance. It was evidence of your influence. There is a psychological law hidden inside almost every relationship. The person who needs less control usually possesses more power. They don't chase outcomes because their identity isn't attached to winning every interaction. They don't fear rejection because they don't depend on universal approval. They don't panic when misunderstood because they already understand themselves. That kind of confidence is impossible to imitate. Eventually, even the people who once believed the performance begin noticing the contradiction. They see one individual working harder every day to maintain an image, while the other continues living without seeking permission from anyone. Respect naturally shifts toward the person who appears complete without constant validation. The greatest transformation wasn't that your critics suddenly became silent. It was that their words stopped carrying weight. Their opinions lost the authority you once gave them. Their attempts to define you became powerless because you no longer accepted their version of your identity. And once a person can no longer control how you see yourself, they lose the only victory they ever believed. They had the cruelest twist of fate, is that the respect they spent so much energy chasing was quietly walking in the opposite direction. Every calculated joke, every public insult, every desperate performance was supposed to earn admiration. Instead, it became undeniable proof of insecurity. While they reached for recognition with both hands, respect slipped through their fingers and settled beside the one person who never asked for it. That's the irony insecure minds never see until it's far too late. Respect has strange instincts. It cannot be manipulated, purchased, or forced into existence. The harder someone demands it, the faster it disappears. It avoids arrogance. It ignores loud declarations of superiority. It refuses to stay where ego constantly begs for attention. Instead, it is drawn towards something much quieter, authentic confidence, the kind that survives criticism, the kind that doesn't collapse under rejection, the kind that exists even when nobody is clapping. This is why so many people misunderstand influence. They think influence is built through visibility. They believe the person speaking the most controls the room. But real influence often belongs to the individual whose presence changes the emotional atmosphere without saying very much. Their calm creates stability. Their confidence creates trust. Their discipline creates curiosity. People begin paying attention not because they are demanding it, but because they naturally command it. That is exactly what happened to you. Without realizing it, every challenge became another brick in the foundation of your reputation. Every insult tested your patience. Every betrayal strengthened your emotional endurance. Every attempt to make you feel insignificant forced you to discover parts of yourself that comfort never could have revealed. Pain became your teacher. Silence became your mentor. Isolation became your training ground. Meanwhile, the people trying to impress others trapped themselves inside an endless performance. They became addicted to appearances. Every conversation needed another victory. Every room required another audience. Every interaction became another opportunity to prove they were important. The exhausting part is that performances never end. Once people know you as the entertainer, they always expect another show. You escaped that prison by refusing to compete. There is incredible freedom in no longer needing strangers to confirm your worth. The day your self-respect became stronger than your desire to be understood was the day your life changed forever. Criticism stopped feeling like an attack. Rejection stopped feeling like failure. Mockery stopped sounding like truth. None of those things disappeared from the world. They simply lost permission to control your identity. That transformation is visible even when no words are spoken. People notice emotional independence the same way they notice genuine courage. It doesn't announce itself. It radiates quietly. Others begin wondering why you remain composed while everyone else becomes consumed by comparison. They wonder why setbacks don't seem to break your spirit. They wonder why insults never seem to change your direction. They may not understand your mindset immediately, but they recognize its strength. Ironically, the very individual they wanted to impress begins seeing something completely different from what they intended. Instead of admiring the performer, they begin respecting the person who refused to perform. Instead of remembering the jokes, they remember the composure. Instead of following the loudest voice, they become curious about the quietest one. That is because mature minds rarely admire perfection. They admire resilience. They understand that anyone can appear confident while life is easy. The true measure of character is revealed when pressure arrives. Can this person remain honorable while being misunderstood? Can they remain disciplined while being provoked? Can they continue growing while others hope they fail? Those answers create lasting respect. The greatest victory was never proving your critics wrong. It was proving to yourself that your value never depended on their opinions in the first place. Once you reached that realization, every external battle became smaller. You no longer wasted energy correcting every false narrative. You no longer chased every misunderstanding. You realized that people committed to misunderstanding you will always invent another reason, while people capable of seeing your character never needed an explanation. In the end, life has a remarkable way of exposing truth without anyone forcing it. Time reveals intentions. Consistency reveals integrity. Pressure reveals identity. The applause fades, the performances end, and the masks eventually become too heavy to wear. What remains is the quiet reputation built through patience, discipline, and unwavering self-control. And that's why the respect they desperately hunted through humiliation ultimately found its home with the one person who never needed to chase it at all.